Minneapolis is burning. An ICE officer just shot a man in the street, and Donald Trump is openly talking about the Insurrection Act again. Social feeds are screaming military crackdown and civil war tonight. But is the White House actually gearing up to send in troops, or is this mostly panic and political theater? Let's break down what's confirmed, what's rumor, and what everyone's getting wrong about the Insurrection Act in the next few minutes. Welcome back to the comments section with Thomas Paul. Let's start with the basics, because in moments like this, headlines move faster than facts. Here's what we know as of taping. In Minneapolis, an ICE officer shot a suspect during an operation. This wasn't a traffic stop by local police. This was a federal immigration enforcement action. The shooting happened in the city. Witnesses started filming immediately, and the footage hit X and TikTok within minutes. Details about the exact sequence are still murky. There are conflicting accounts about whether the suspect was armed, what kind of threat the officer perceived, and how many shots were fired. As of right now, casualty and injury reports are still being updated, and official timelines are incomplete. So if you see screenshots claiming to know every detail down to the millisecond, treat those like fan fiction, not evidence. What is clear is what came next. Within hours, people started gathering at the scene. That turned into protests. By nighttime, some areas of Minneapolis saw broken windows, fires, and clashes with law enforcement. Emergency services reported multiple incidents across the city. You've probably seen the same 3 or 4 clips of burning buildings and people running from tear gas, replayed like they're the entire city. They're not, but they are real. And while that was unfolding, Trump and key allies began floating the idea of using the Insurrection Act if the unrest spread or local authorities lost control. The language has been deliberately fuzzy. Phrases like "all options are on the table" and "we won't hesitate to restore order" are doing a lot of work here. Some surrogates have gone further and explicitly said Insurrection Act. Others are just heavily hinting. So, 1, we have a politically explosive ICE shooting. 2, we have real unrest on the ground in Minneapolis. 3, we have the president and his orbit publicly entertaining the idea of a rarely used emergency power. And here's where things get interesting. A lot of people online are already talking as if the Insurrection Act has been signed and the troops are physically loading onto trucks. That is not where we are. Before we get into the spin, we need a quick, boring but crucial detour: what the Insurrection Act actually is. The Insurrection Act is a set of federal laws that let a president deploy active-duty military or federalized National Guard inside the United States in certain extreme situations. Insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combinations, things that prevent the enforcement of federal law, or that deprive people of constitutional rights when local authorities can't, or won't, fix it. This is not some brand new toy. It's been around since the early 1800s. It was used to enforce desegregation in the South in the 1950s and 60s. It was invoked during the 1992 Los Angeles riots. More recently, there was a debate about using it in 2020 during the George Floyd protests, but it never actually got formally invoked. Here's what it does not do. It does not instantly create martial law in the sense that the Constitution disappears and the president becomes emperor for a day. That's how it's often sold on social media, because complicated emergency statute with contested legal history doesn't get clicks. If the president formally invokes the act, it allows him to order troops to enforce federal law and restore order under specific justifications. There are still courts. There are still lawsuits. There is still Congress. There are still governors who can push back politically and legally. And there are huge political costs if the public sees it as an overreaction or an authoritarian move. But wait, it gets even more tangled. The Insurrection Act lives at the intersection of civil liberties and public safety. On one side, you have people warning that sending in troops against protesters, or even mixed crowds of protesters and rioters, is a giant step toward normalizing military policing of civilians. On the other side, you have people pointing at burning buildings and saying, "Do something." A president doesn't push that button in a vacuum. They're weighing, how bad is the unrest? How are the polls? How will governors react? How will the courts interpret this? And, very bluntly, how does this play with the base? Okay, back to the online chaos, because that's where most people are getting their information right now. If you scroll X for more than 30 seconds, you'll see at least 3 competing versions of reality. Version 1, the law and order storyline. This camp is posting loops of looting and fires in Minneapolis, often with captions like, "These aren't protests, they're terrorists," or "Send in the troops now." Any nuance about why people are angry at ICE or the details of the shooting gets stripped out. It's all about chaos, threat, and the idea that only overwhelming force can restore normal. Version 2, the civil liberties storyline. These posts frame Trump's Insurrection Act talk as proof that he's itching for a domestic crackdown. You'll see phrases like trial run for dictatorship or this is how democracy dies. Many of these posts skip over the legal constraints and jump straight to worst-case scenarios. Tanks on every corner, curfews everywhere, mass arrests of anyone holding a sign. Then there's version 3, the hyperbolic doom posting. This is where you get Civil War by Friday, Minneapolis is gone, and graphics predicting nationwide uprisings tonight. These go viral fast because fear travels well. They stitch together the most dramatic clips from Minneapolis, the scariest possible interpretation of Trump's comments, and maybe a screenshot of some leaked memo that nobody can actually source. And here's the thing, each side is using very selective reality. If you only see burning buildings, you'll think the entire city is a war zone, and anything less than the 82nd Airborne is doing nothing. If you only see peaceful marches and ignore the fires, you'll assume anyone talking about unrest is manufacturing consent for a crackdown. If you only see Trump's most extreme quotes without any legal context, he looks omnipotent. If you only see the constraints, you might underestimate what he can actually do. I learned a long time ago how much framing matters. In my early 20s, I worked at a local newspaper. Same story, 2 headlines. One sounded like the economy was booming, the other like we were days away from collapse. Nothing changed except the angle. That's what social media is doing to you right now, on steroids. So let's zoom out. What are the realistic near-term scenarios? Scenario 1, de-escalation and local handling. Minneapolis has unfortunately been here before. Local officials, community leaders, and even national advocates know the playbook. Public statements, investigations, sometimes federal oversight, sometimes body cam releases, sometimes leadership changes. If protests stay mostly peaceful and the worst of the unrest burns out after a few nights, the pressure on Trump to actually invoke anything drops. He still gets to talk tough for his base without paying the full price of actually sending troops. Scenario 2, sustained, spreading unrest. If Minneapolis stays volatile and the protests spread to other cities with similar ICE tensions, the do-something drumbeat gets louder. Cable news loves a fire loop. Politicians love a crisis they can point to. Governors will be under pressure to request federal help or to loudly refuse it. That's where the Insurrection Act talk becomes more than just a talking point. Even then, keep in mind, there are steps. Before troops, there's more federal law enforcement. There are task forces. There are DOJ investigations. Invoking the act is technically possible but politically explosive. It's not a casual move. And here's where this ties into 2026 politics. Immigration and policing were already front-burner issues. An ICE shooting turning into days of unrest in Minneapolis is a perfect storm. Federal power, local anger, and a president whose brand is, "I alone can fix it." For Trump's base, talking about the Insurrection Act reinforces the idea that he's willing to go further than weak opponents to restore order. For his critics, it reinforces every fear about creeping authoritarianism and militarized domestic policy. For people in the middle, it may come down to what images they see more of: burning storefronts or peaceful marches, soldiers patrolling streets, or local leaders diffusing tension. In my early 30s, I learned to distrust hype the hard way. Everyone around me chased flashy, once-in-a-lifetime investments. I put money into something boring and unfashionable. It didn't make me rich overnight, but it worked. Slowly. That same instinct applies here, when everyone is screaming that the world will end by the weekend, or that there's nothing to worry about at all. My money is on reality landing somewhere in between. So here's my suggestion. Be allergic to both extremes. If someone tells you Civil War tonight based on a 10-second clip and a half transcript of a Trump quote, ask what's actually been signed, ordered, or deployed. If someone says nothing to see here, just a few kids acting out, ask why the president is even mentioning the Insurrection Act. Follow verified reporting. Look for specific sourced statements from officials, not anonymous leaks with no documentation. And when in doubt, ask, who benefits from me being scared or outraged right now? Quick disclaimer before we wrap this part up. None of this is legal advice or political advice. It's analysis and commentary. If you're making decisions that depend on the law, talk to an actual attorney, not a guy on YouTube. And if you're watching this thinking, I'd love to break down stories like this, but I don't want to be on camera, learn editing, and live on social media. This channel is actually powered by a system built for exactly that. This video was created with Fludge.io, the same setup running this whole channel. It handles the heavy lifting, researching trending topics, writing structured scripts, generating the avatar, and uploading videos, while still letting you stay in control. You can jump in at any point, add your own analysis, or even record your own voice if you want. Over time, it learns your style and gets better. If you've ever wanted to run a serious commentary channel without building a studio in your living room, check out Fludge.io. So, where does that leave us? We have a deadly serious incident in Minneapolis, a city with a long memory of police and federal violence. We have a president publicly flirting with one of the most powerful emergency tools in the legal toolbox. We have social media feeding you fear and certainty in equal doses. Your job, and mine, is to stay grounded. Don't ignore the real risks of presidents normalizing emergency powers. But also, don't hand over your emotional thermostat to the loudest doom poster of the day. History is written by people who kept their heads while everyone else was refreshing their feeds. I want to hear from you on this one. Do you think Trump is actually willing to sign an Insurrection Act order over unrest like this, or is he just using the threat as political theater? And how are you deciding who to trust when everything is breaking all the time? Drop your take in the comments. I read as many as I can, and they genuinely help shape what we cover next. If you found this breakdown useful, hit like so more people see it, and subscribe to the comment section with Thomas Paul for more skeptical, no bullshit coverage of stories like this. Stay sharp, stay skeptical, and I'll see you in the next one.